And we also have joining us remotely our finance manager, Kelly Carbo.
Yes, she's on.
Okay. And also our Chief of Technology Services Center and Chief Innovation Officer, Marcia Shells, because the major portion of our fiscal year 26 budget request has to do with the technology expenses. So we're hoping between the four of us that we'll be able to answer whatever questions you might have. Greg would primarily be presenting the budget, but I just wanted to, as a brief overview, explain that we provided some slides as well as an up and down and a memo that provides the narrative explanation for the budget request. We're happy to say that the request is we feel a very straightforward request this year. And it is something that's in the governor's recommend, but Greg will go through, for example, the difference between the fiscal year 26 budget and the fiscal year 25 budget and explain the increases that are built in. One, primarily having to do with the tech fund, which Greg will explain. And we, in prior years, a number of you who've been on the committee are familiar with the tech fund that's historically funded our technology expenses that we've reached now the point that we've kind of been mentioning the last at least several years. And Greg will kind of explain in detail, but that's the bulk, the main request in the fiscal year 26 proposal.
Do you want to share your screen or what do you want to do? What should we be looking at?
I think I would prefer to talk to the presentation, the PowerPoint, because there's some information in there and some graphs that make it a little bit more interesting to read than the ups and downs spreadsheet.
Great. Okay.
I don't know that I can share my screen unless I plug in somewhere.
If you join the Zoom link in the calendar appointment, I can make you a co-host and you can share from there. So.
Okay. While I'm doing that, though, I can start talking about the judiciary's budget. Our increases are actually in the governor's recommend, which is a wonderful starting point to be at. There really are only two new expenses. It's the sheriff's cost of living increase and the IT expense. Let me just zoom in here so I can pull up the slides for you. Our last year's budget, looks like I can't connect. So I'm just going to talk to the slides.
And we have the slides.
Yeah.
And I have a hard copy of the slides, if that would be helpful. I can
Yes, you have that.
Oh, okay.
So
This sheet here.
yes,
Yes, okay.
so you see on the second slide,
It's on my desk.
on the second slide, it shows our FY25 budget, $63 million. And it's important to note that there's a budget adjustment request in process. 2.5, that's what we came to talk to the committee about last month. Most of that is IT expense, and there's a sheriff's cost of living increase as well in there. That's important to note because the BAA and the ups and downs kind of interplay a little bit, and I'll explain that in a minute. So the increases for this year are $7 million. That's separate from the budget adjustment. If you add those two together, you get the $9 million that you see in the ups and downs in the governor's recommendation.
Did we do that BAA request?
It's in the BAA. I don't know that the BAA has
We
been.
did it. Okay. I remember the 850. That's what I.
Yeah, it was
Who's the
money
other part?
being reverted that they wanted to spend for IT upgrades
Right.
and wiring.
And then we have core technology.
Right.
So,
Okay.
so, yeah.
Okay.
All right, moving on to the next slide. On slide 3, we kind of go over the ups and downs in a different format. This is the statewide pressures. We list out the judiciary specific pressures. And then on the slide, I've added a little bit of new information about the BAA and how that interacts. So on the ups and downs for tech fund revenue replacement, there's a number there of $3.4 million. But that's a multi-year number. And that's the important thing to remember is this technology fund has been declining for many years. We've been supplementing by either year-end surplus or one-time funding. we've been coming to the legislature and saying this is going to be an issue 1 year. Last year was it. Most of that is in the BAA. 2.1 million of the BAA request was to cover this revenue reduction and increase in technology costs, which means if the BAA passes, then that number changes to $1.3 million. That's the new funding that we would need above the BAA. And that would bring us to an FY26 full funding level. Much of that 1.3 is a loss of one-time revenue. Last year, the legislature gave us $750,000 in that contingent one-time funding at the end of the year. So of that 1.3, 750 is revenue replacement from that one time. And really only about 500,000 is increased technology costs from last year.
How have you been filling the tech fund? Where does the money come from to contribute to tech?
Money comes from fees on top of civil violations. So civil violations mostly are traffic tickets, but they can be forest, parks, violations as well. The revenue from those tickets actually don't come to the judiciary. We do the collection and the management of the debt. What comes to the technology fund are 3 fees that are on top of that. There's a administrative fee, $12.50 on every fee that's collected. And then there's late fees. There's a failure to answer in a particular time frame. That's I think a $20 fee. And then there's a failure to pay, which is a $30 fee. So it's late fees on top of civil fees. Nobody likes those at all.
No.
And they've been declining year over year since about 2017. It used to be about $1.6 million in revenue coming in. Now it's about 750,000, so a little bit less than half. And going forward, and the tech fund was created in 2007, and at the time, our technology costs and the revenue matched very well. But over time, the revenue has gone down. Civil violation payments have gone down. In technology, of course, as you know, continue to rise. And so that's no longer a mechanism that's going to be sustainable. It can supplement our IT costs, but it will not pay for the whole thing.
Appropriations question.
So the decrease in the fees are there fewer tickets being written or are there fewer of them making it through the process or are people just paying better?
Fewer payments are coming in. The collection on these is worse than they used to be, but I don't know about the number of tickets. That would be something that I just don't have in front of me. The JFO did an issue brief. It's now been about 2 years where they talked about that and all the different funds that have some sort of revenue accounting attached to civil violations. We're all feeling the same type of impact. I can tell you that the collection on civil violations is worse because there's been policy changes that allow people to get their license back without paying the underlying fee. Many years ago, you had to pay the traffic ticket in order to get your license reinstated. Now you can go to the DMV, pay your $85 reinstatement fee. You never have to pay that $300 speeding ticket. So what's happening is the collection rate is going down and the accounts receivable that we're tracking is just climbing.
We did that in judiciary.
Yeah, we did that a couple of years ago.
About 2017. They were lined up all around the courthouse or somewhere in Burlington.
Yeah, that was associated with the same law. It wasn't because of the suspension changes. That was some sort of ticket holiday.
Yes.
Where you paid $25 and regardless of the amount, it was paid off. So going down these statewide pressures just quickly, these are probably things you've already seen from other departments. Our annualization of the Pay Act is 3.2, almost $3.3 million. We negotiated a contract. It's very consistent with the executive branch. I think this last year it was a 4.5% of steps. So it's very consistent with what you see from the executive branch. And so are our benefit increases, 1.7 million. Most of that is healthcare. That also includes some retirement and some other benefits in there. I think that's fairly consistent with other departments. And then there's the internal service fund, that's going up $457,000. The vast majority of that is fee for space. And that's the rent that BGS calculates for us for our state-owned courthouses.
Is that a bigger jump than you've had in the past?
That's a bigger jump. We pay over $6 million for all of our state courthouses. It's important to remember that we also have some county courthouses that are owned by county government. That's not included in this number.
Where does that show up?
They provide space to the judiciary rent-free.
Oh, I see.
So we don't pay rent for the county courthouses. We pay fee for space for the state courthouses. There's 11 state courthouses and 12 county courthouses. The county ones are smaller, generally speaking.
Okay, so the one in Middlebury, is that a state one?
State one.
So you're paying rent on that?
We're paying fee for space
Fee
to
for space.
BGS. Yeah. And they have a formula for figuring out square footage, common space, all that, all those costs. And it's usually by area. So Addison County would have a rate per square foot. Chittenden County would have a different rate per square foot. So we just follow their formula. And for the most part, there's few changes in our footprint in state buildings, although this particular year, there is an aberration to that in Orleans County, where the state's attorneys has moved out of the courthouse. We are now taking more of that space. This fee is in arrears, so we'll see that increase next year. Judiciary specific pressures comes down to really just two, and these two will become very familiar, I think, because these will be ongoing annual increases. The tech fund revenue replacement, I mentioned the 3.4 million being a multi-year fix. Once we get to next year and the dust settles, we really think that we'll have a standard increase every year in the realm of, a couple of percentage points. Cost of living type of increase. It'll be in a $200,000 to $500,000 range. When ADS comes to present their budget, we're no longer part of that. So they come every year and say, oh, technology is increasing. We'll do the same thing because we have an independent network now. So our increase is not going to be part of their requests.
How's the independent network working for you? I mean, I remember when you did that and.
We've had a lot better reliability and faster. It's completely implemented now at this point, and we definitely have had much smoother operations.
So you're happy with the changes that you?
Yes.
Absolutely. And I don't know, Marcia, you're on the line if you have anything to add to that.
Yes, thank you. Hi. I'm actually very pleased to say we've had 100% uptime on the network. We have redundancy as well. So if one section goes, I saw that contributes to the 100% up, but we have redundancy that we didn't have before. And we have not had any problems with performance due to network traffic. So we're very pleased from an IT perspective. Thank you.
Great. Good. Okay.
Moving on then to the next item, that's security services COLA, cost of living adjustment. This particular year, we're projecting 200,000, which kind of correlates with what the state employees are getting. It would be equivalent to about a 3.7% increase for the sheriff. This is mainly the sheriffs, but it also includes one private company. This is something that's not in the Pay Act because they're not state employees. We contract with the county sheriff to do this, separate from the transport deputies. It's a different structure. And, this is going to be a pressure, I think, every year that sheriffs are providing services for us. So if you don't look at it from a multi-year perspective, our increase is only $1.5 million for judicial pressures. And that would bring our budget to about $72 million. And these numbers, yes, these are general fund numbers. And moving on to the next slide, we just kind of show a little bit of how we spend that $72 million. You can see on slide 4, the pie chart there, that vast majority is salary and benefits. Our staff, our most important resource in the court system, are the people. And so 71% of our budget goes to paying for that cost. Fee for space is listed there at 8%, security contract at 6%. The IT budget is 4.7%, and that leaves everything else that we do just 8% of our budget, or almost 9% of our budget. And everything else that we do includes judicial programs, things like mediation or interpreters or the Guardian Ad Litem program, to things like in-state mileage, training, conferences, office supplies, postage, jury admin, security equipment, everything else that we do is 8.8%.
So and maybe this is somewhere else in your presentation, but can you spend just a minute talking about the court backlog and that's looking?
Sure. We're first of all thrilled that as of February 10th, this week, we are fully staffed in terms of judges. The governor appointed 4 judges and they're now fully trained and took the bench on February 10th. So the first time in years, we have every judge seat filled. And that has been the single kind of one of the largest reasons why trying to dig out of the pandemic backlog, it's taken time. We presented to a joint judicial House and Senate committees, and for fiscal year 24, we have the most recent for the year data. The statewide, all divisions, all counties, clearance rate was 106%. You always try for 100%, so you have at least as many cases being disposed as coming in. So it was 100%, 106% statewide. Since then, the most recent as of last Friday was 108%. I mean, the goal is to keep increasing, and really thanks to the hard work of judges and court staff, state's attorneys, public defenders, et cetera, we are definitely on a good path in terms of disposing more but with having the full complement of judges is going to make the biggest difference.
I'm sure, because I'm trying to remember the numbers. Was it around 16,000 backlog last year or 25? I can't remember. Or total cases that were
pending. Oh, no, it's larger than that. It was new filings per year is about 40,000.
okay.
Yeah. And then actually the Judicial Bureau is another 40,000. We don't typically count because those are very kind of quick, short.
Yeah.
But that's the statewide number of filings on average.
Sure, everybody's happy to have all the judges there.
Oh, just thrilled.
Thanks. So I interrupted you. Where are you?
I was going to move on to slide 5, unless there's questions. Slide 5 basically shows our funding sources. So we're here asking for general fund portion of our budget, which is 92.5% of our entire budget. So we are almost primarily general funded. The other small pieces of our budget, there's small fees, environmental permit fees and waste management fees that are fractions of percentages. There's also a tobacco litigation fund, which has no new dollars coming into it, but it had one-time dollars from years ago. The inter-unit transfer fund, 3% of our revenue comes from that. That I'll go into more detail on the next slide, but that's essentially payments from other government agencies. The vast majority of that being Title 4D payments from child support. That is technically a federal fund, but it goes to DCF. And so when it comes to us, it comes in as an interdepartmental transfer. And then the other wedge there that you see, 4.2%, is broken out in that smaller pie chart. Federal funds is about 2%. The court technology fund, we get the 1%. That's roughly the $750,000. And we also run an attorney licensing professional review. And so we have licensing fees and bar fees that are part of that. So you can see that we're very dependent on general funds and very dependent on the staff.
Do you have any concerns about edicts coming out of Washington, your effect on you?
Well, if you look at the next slide.
Okay, I'm jumping ahead again.
I thought you might ask a question about our federal funding, so I put a slide in here that lists all of our grants.
Right,
Federal
okay.
funding. So we have 5 federal grants, most of them dealing with treatment courts. And you see the annualized amount there. It's only $1.5 million per year. Some of those grants, though, are multi-year grants. So I'm just showing the 1-year number there. That's a small percentage. It's 2% of our entire budget, but I also wanted to highlight the indirect federal funding. So I mentioned Title 4D. You'll see that listed under indirect federal funding. So
Oh, yes.
these originate as federal dollars that come into Vermont, but they go to other state agencies and then they pay the judiciary for various activities. And so you can see there that we have another $2 million, most of it being Title 4D child support, which adds another 3% to our total budget. So we really have about 3.9 million in federal dollars that could be impacted. The indirect funding would be picked up if you're doing it like I know Emily Byrne was here.
Yeah,
She picked up that federal funding when she included AHS.
okay, so that's where it is.
So that's where it shows up, but it is actually in our budget. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, that's very helpful to. Questions about that? And you haven't heard anything at this point or had any difficulty accessing the federal funds that you needed?
Yeah, although right now there's a kind of a halt to the freeze.
Right,
But we have in conjunction, there are liaisons that we have with the different grant and they're seeking certification that we would be not affected by a freeze if it goes into effect.
Rep. Dickinson?
Yeah, the drug court issue, you have one here under the family drug court, then there's the drug court substance use program. That was something that was promoted when I was in judiciary, like maybe 8 years ago. And seems to be pretty successful at trying to intervene. How is that doing or where is that? I know there was some attempt to try to make it statewide, but it never seemed to go anywhere.
The primary reason why the treatment courts are not statewide has to do with the level of services that are available per county, because it requires local service providers. And basically where the drug treatment courts are now in Chittenden, Rutland, Washington County, and then family treatment also in Chittenden is where there are service providers that are able to, especially with lack of transportation. We do have options where in counties they can, for example, in Addison County, participate in either the Chittenden or the Rutland, but they have to have the transportation to get there. So it's limited applicability.
You need a referral source.
Yes, but mainly it's my understanding it's where, because we don't have the level of service available in each county to support the drug treatment, because it's a whole kind of holistic approach. But one thing that actually we're doing with training monies from the opiate settlement group, at least we've been recommended for it, is training that would allow judges to apply the treatment court strategies, whether there's a treatment court in that county or not, the same kind of incentives and ability to, if people are able to follow the rules and all, it then impacts their, whether they go to jail. And the hope is that it would provide incentives to allow people to get on the right path. So that's one way we're trying to implement the strategies, even if we don't have the treatment court in place in every county.
Okay, thank you.
And that's all I have to present, unless there are questions or if you want to go into other areas.
Anybody have any questions?
Over the years, the tech aspect, the online systems have had their ups and downs now. Do you think we're on track with that?
Well, I really applaud Marcia Shells and her team who have a very customer service oriented approach. We did have definitely bumps with the Odyssey system and working them out. One nice turn of events and along those lines is we had very little kind of leverage or bargaining power being such a small state, but the states that use Tyler Technologies, which is what we use, have banded together. So with that, we have been able to get more improvements and enhancements than we had been able to in the past. But it really, everybody has been very patient. There's fewer glitches, but we're not without them. I mean, we still have issues, but people are now used to it. And with anything, the more you do it, kind of, it gets a little bit easier. And we also have a change advisory board so that court users have a mechanism if they want to request a change or an enhancement, that we have a mechanism to do that. And we have been able to follow through over the things that we have control. And other times Tyler has said we can't do it or it's going to cost you $1 million, but at least we have a way to assist them so that we can try to continually improve it.
And overall, that network is really kind of state of the art now. It's been developed from last year when we went independent from ADS. And all the remote technology that came into place during COVID required us really to upgrade our systems, our bandwidth, our cabling, all that stuff. So these courthouses really are running from a technology standpoint very well.
Anybody have any more questions? And this is Trevor, so he's on. Did you have a question?
No, it's actually not a question, it's just a comment. I mean, I'm trying to count up the number of funds that don't produce enough money to fund the activities that are in a kind of a core part of the agency, the department, et cetera. And I do think that, I don't know whether this is the right committee to try to address that. It may be Ways and Means, or it may be the policy committees, but it's concerning to me that we've got a structure, we have these departments that, or whole branches of government that rely on a certain source of funding that just doesn't pay out the way we assume it will budget year after year after year. I mean, this is only my third year on this committee, but that is my concern. So.
Well, and that's why we're requesting, in all honesty, that the tech expenses be paid out of the general fund versus this tech fund that has just proven to be insufficient.
Yeah, I just want to follow on Representative Lumley's comment. I've been participating in the Coordinated Justice Reform Advisory Council, which Judge Zoney was chair of, that came out of the legislation a few years ago, looking at restorative justice. But one of the things our group ended up talking about was all the special funds, fees and fines, and driving and supporting criminal justice program. So it fits into this. And one of the recommendations that council made to House Judiciary in December, because we issued a report, which I can show you, to basically do away with funding programs through special funds and to evaluate all those programs, general fund, support them. Don't do away with the special funds and the fees and fines, because there might be reasons for those, but let them just drop into the general fund and then make sure that our programming is sustainable and predictable. Now, that's a big lift. If you think about all the special, what this 15-page document we get from finance and management, all the special funds we have. But we have made that recommendation. Where that goes, I don't know.
That's good. Rep. Dickinson, did you have a question? And then
I happen to agree with Representative Lumley. We have made policy. I've been on committees where we've made these policy decisions, and I know we're supposed to see these things in appropriations when we talk about revenue, but I'm not sure some of these policy changes that will have revenue changes that for different agencies get seen here. I mean, this is a good example of one that just seemed like a great idea to go and forgive these, that was holiday for the lots and lots of people were losing their ability to drive. They couldn't get to work. I mean, it was we wanted to make these people productive. They had traffic tickets or whatever it was. And it was something that's a great idea. And we did it, but not really thinking about it might have been mentioned very briefly that this was going to have an impact on your fund. I mean, the Secretary of State with these compacts is having an increasing impact on their fees and their ability to do their work based on the fees they collect and that they need. And we're just doing it. And it's going to come out of the general fund to do the work they have to do sooner or later. I mean, we've got it probably in all sorts of places.
Yes.
And I don't know if we don't see these things here or if we should, or maybe we see it and we don't connect with
So
it.
this is an item that we may want to add to a list somewhere in April, when we have a little more time, this is a theme that we're seeing, and let's think about talking about that. So can you keep a list?
Please, yes, I actually.
Three themes that we're thinking about.
Okay, this is good, a little tip list.
Yeah, well,
Now,
we'll add this to the tip list.
Okay.
This is an issue that we see and a theme that we see
Okay.
everywhere, and let's find out more and think about how we need to think about it.
Just to add a little bit more to that, I mean, many of these things, we don't know the history of how they were set up originally. There may have been enough money to fund those things originally, then things change.
Right,
And like some agencies that have fees attached, they have to come in for the fee, but to have a fee bill.
right,
And if we don't do fee bills properly,
right.
then you're not gonna be able to fund that agency as well.
Exactly.
So all these things change, you don't know the history, the moving parts change. And like with you, you get people that used to pay their fines, and they're not paying their fines anymore for whatever reason, or it can't be collected. So now the rest of us, or through the general fund, have to pay for what they were supposed to be paying. So, to get to
Right.
the
Or
bottom
the reason
line.
that they don't, just, it doesn't bring in as much because there isn't actually enough, there are fewer whatevers, right?
And so our experience is, yes, the fees stay the same and the costs go up every year. And so it's that issue. In civil violations, there was the policy decision not to burden the people. Generally, there's a
They already
smaller group
can't
of
pay,
people.
right.
Right, they can't pay, and if you suspend their license, they can't get to work and earn the money to pay. So there was a policy decision that had a financial impact that was going to creep up. The other thing, from our perspective is that the accounts receivable is creeping up. And so the question that will eventually come up is, at what point does that do the bond raters start looking at the uncollectible debt and start impacting your rating? And how much resources are going into tracking this debt that's really uncollectible?
And why don't we just clear it off the books? I mean, if we're never gonna collect it, why are we keeping it?
That was
Right.
probably part of the logic, is that some of this was unclear. And there's some places where communities, this was seen as an unfair thing to do to community and to people in communities.
Right.
Where the fees just sort of get added on and added on and added on, and it's often people just can't dig themselves out from owing all these fees. And that's often the low income or the people who don't have the resources.
Right.
It's an insidious sort of holds down people from
Yeah.
getting out from under this.
Yeah.
It's
It's not a good thing. So what is your collectible? Then I'll get to this to John as a question too.
Your
receivable.
I don't have that number recently. I have provided presentations to either this committee or Ways and
Yeah.
Means in the past to say, hey, this is happening. I could do that again.
Are we talking in the millions?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yes. And
I just wanted to get a sense of scale.
And one thing that happened in 2017, when that ticket holiday happened and the driver suspension changes were implemented, is we also looked at some tickets that were older than X number of years. I think it was like 1995 or 96, anything older than that. And we just wrote that off. And in terms of a dollar amount, that was a very small amount. But what happens is over time, we have a lot of debtors who have passed away or moved out of state. It's simply uncollectible. And we have tickets from, the 90s
Yeah.
that just aren't going to get paid.
Sounds like some cleanup is needed there. Yeah. Rep. Kasenska.
Yeah, it's more of a statement than a question, I guess. We create all these fees sometimes as incentives for people to respond, to show up, or to pay their bill, and all these things, and that generates a certain amount of revenue clearly here, and we make decisions to use that to help support something that wasn't really an overall intent of supporting, especially things like tech, and we know tech just keeps costs increase every year as technology changes, there's the software and everything else that's attached to that. And it just kind of begs the question, how often should we be reviewing what we're actually using these fees for?
Right.
And here we are today, and we're discovering all kinds of increases in tech support all the way across all the departments.
Right.
And that's just kind of what that is at the moment here. But I think moving ahead, we start adding fees to different things. What are we using that fee for?
Right.
How
Well,
reliant
and
on that to
a few
support.
years ago,
I think has been supporting things for a long period of time,
until we have a big jump and change in technology.
So.
Just don't do it enough.
A few years ago, we had a boards and commissions. Okay.
Just one more thing, so I don't forget my thought here. I
Yeah.
think a lot of that starts in the policy committees. We start looking at what we're looking to perhaps include in a spending bill, we're gonna kind of looking ahead a little bit further. Can't predict everything.
Right, but it's clearly a bigger issue, and we did something, my first or second term here, GovOps had a bill about boards and commissions, and they put together a working group who reviewed all the boards and commissions, because we have hundreds of those, and some of them weren't meeting. You might have been on GovOps at the time, and so we got rid of a lot of boards and commissions, they were meeting over a period of time, and so we could do something similar around fees too, Lynn?
Yeah, well, the fee, well, those have been here a while. A fee is not a tax and a tax is not a fee. And a tax is, broad-based and it does something for everybody that you need to do to run government. But a fee is supposed to be just for the cost of an agency to do a very specific thing. And the Secretary of State with OPR is a really good example. It's a disciplinary board. It has to have hearings. It has to support the lawyers and the people who do the work. So the fee is not there to generate revenue for lots of things. It's just there to run that part of that office. And the same with DMV and other things like that. Now, I'm not sure where the tech fund comes in because there's also petroleum cleanup fees and other kinds of fees. And some of them don't have very much money in them.
Yeah,
And they aren't used very often.
the petroleum cleanup is the environmental fee.
Yeah,
it's a
but
very
you-
small dollar amount.
Yeah. And then there's others where it just seems to be like, I know that the general fund pulls money out of some of those special funds because it has money in it and they need it, they just pull it out.
One of the other impacts that doesn't impact judiciary, but it's related to this technology, the civil violation problem is when there's a traffic ticket written on a state road, a portion of that goes to the Department of Transportation and they use it as local match for federal dollars.
Right.
And I don't know what that looks like, but I would imagine that they're scrambling because their portion of this has shrunk as well.
Oh, okay. Transportation.
No.
It's just everywhere. Okay. You pull a thread and, right, and it's really something. Great. Well, thank you for coming. Thank you for indulging us on the fee conversation as well. It's very helpful.
Thank you.
And we appreciate all the work you're doing. It's very exciting that you have judges and that your closure rate is over 100%. So sounds like you're in the right direction. So.
And this time next year, hopefully we can give a very good report on that.
We'll look forward to hearing that too. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So committee, I'll get to the right page. We have a break. Estates and attorneys tariffs are at 11, so we have a break now. And then it looks like on one of our bills this afternoon, there might be a committee amendment that we need to add one other group to the working group that has the per diem. So we'll see. So what happens for those that are new to this committee is if a bill comes and there's changes, we can do a committee amendment while we have the possession of it. And we don't have to it doesn't have to go back to the other committee. They'll do a straw poll. Yeah, we don't have to do a floor amendment. That way it's just cleaner when it's something easy and we can agree to it. We'll just do a House Appropriations Committee amendment. So that might be happening. So we might have even more excitement than we thought with our bills this afternoon.